Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have the always amazing Tom Field joining us again. How are you, Tom?
Great. Thanks so much for giving me some more time to interact with you. I've been looking forward to this.
I am so excited to have you back. I always love our time together. And today we're going to be talking about a great subject. We're going to call it Leaving the Cave, talking about moving on from COVID and some of the stuff we've gone through. So, Tom, before we get into the episode, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
You bet. My name's Tom Field. I'm the director of the Angler Agribusiness Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And what we do is we embolden people on the courageous pursuit of their purpose through the art and practice of entrepreneurship. I also am a rancher. I have a ownership in a cow-calf operation in Western Colorado as well. So apparently not the capacity to have full attention on any one thing.
I love it. Isn't that the best? The Jack and Jill of all trades?
Absolutely.
Life interesting.
Being a generalist does have certain value.
Yeah. Okay. So we are talking about moving out of the cave, and I have some questions I want to ask you and some things we want to talk about. Do you want to maybe set the stage for this conversation a little bit? Would you be okay with that? Kind of where we're at and what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and then let's dive into some of the things I wanted to ask you, if you're okay with that.
You bet. So let me just start with thinking about this from the perspective of history, right? So we overuse today, like everybody loves to use this. We see this in the media a lot, like unprecedented. Well, okay, let's pause. Unprecedented. I'm just wrapping up a history of the United States, a book that I'm reading, and it's been a labor of love. But in society, we have been challenged with setbacks and with pauses for a long period of time, right? I mean, if you go way back, you think about in medieval times, right? And the Black Plague, right? That would have been horrifying. That would have been a very frightening, right? Because it was all attributed to things that were almost, it's kind of almost a mystical sort of approach to things. And we have encountered wars and economic downturns and all kinds of things. And our response to that is oftentimes to retreat, right? To pull back. And I think, in the last 2.5 years, I think all of us have witnessed, both individually and certainly societally, we've seen this pullback, right? And that retreat to the basement, retreat to the cave kind of concept. And early on, that was probably, maybe there was even some sense in that, because it was like we didn't know, right? But you can't stay there, right? Yeah. You can't stay there. I think about my Irish ancestors, right? In the middle of the potato famine and the fact that they had no real stature in society in Ireland. And so they left, right? And they had to leave the cave. There was no protection to be had running from the situation. They had to move forward. So I think that's the thing that is worth all of us doing some real thinking about is, okay, how are we going to reclaim the authority over our own lives, and what is going to be, and many people have already sort of like they never got in the cave, right? They like, no, I'm moving forward. I'm not. And the essential workers, right? I still laugh about that, right? All of a sudden being blue collar was really a powerful thing because you were essential, right?
Yeah.
And all the
farmers, the truckers, they were all
everybody else went to the basement like they needed to be protected. And I was super happy to just claim No, I'm an essential worker. I'm going to put my blue collar hat on. I'm going back to work. But I think it's like reclaiming, right? And I think that's something that's really important for people, families, and businesses to really think about is how are we like emerging and recognizing that the last 2.5 years did have an impact variably and diversely on different people. Like not everybody experienced this the same way.
Oh, wow. There's so many things. I could go 100 different directions just off of what you said right there, but you're so right. And I mean, one of the things I want to mention here, I mean, I'm media in a sense, we're a little bit different in our platform, but I think also the effect of media, maybe you might want to talk about that later, but the nonstop bombardment of media on us, right? It's hard to move on, especially if we're tuned into social media and the news all the time. Well, we don't want to leave the cave if we're listening to those guys. Anyways, so
yep. That's right.
We could go on about 10 different rabbit trails right off the hop here. But Kate, I think your first point that you wanted to touch on is reclaiming authority. And I think that goes well where you just left off.
Yeah, when you think about this, right? And we're seeing this, we've seen this especially in young people, like for whatever, for good or for bad, for right or for wrong, right? History is going to sort this all out, right? And it will be very interesting to read a decade from now about this era. Mm-hmm. But for better or for worse, right or for wrong, people did pay a price, right? And especially younger people, really, they lost some things, right? They lost important transitions and celebrations and benchmarks of those transitions, graduations, their senior season of playing hockey or soccer or baseball or running track or whatever it was, right? They lost that. It was taken away from them. And we also, in one form or another, we had to conform to a regulatory environment that, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We're trying to protect people, right? If I make that assumption, right? And in the spirit of
that's safe to say.
Kindness, I'm going to start there, right? I might not finish there, but I'll start there. And so we all began to there were things we changed.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that if you don't reclaim back your authority, right, now that we know more and we're aware, I mean, you go back and you even look at Bill Gates, right, has sort of said, well, he doesn't really want to admit it, but maybe some of the things we did weren't perfectly sensible. You reclaim that, and that's really, really important. And I will tell you, in our program at Nebraska, what we did for the full time is we worked really, really hard to keep people in control of the authority. And we did everything we knew how to do to adapt to the rules. But what we were committed to was giving people back. And we actually made that promise. We said to people, I promise you, if you work with our program, we will spend however long it takes trying to give you back what this pandemic has tried to take from you.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And, and it was awesome at our senior dinner and our year-end celebration this year. One of the seniors got up and he said, I'm finishing here because you didn't give up on who we could be.
You're making me tear up, Tom. I got to jump in there quickly and I'll explain why I'm tearing up, because in different areas have been at different levels of lockdown and different regulation, right? Wow. It's surprising. Look at the emotion that's on all of us here. Didn't realize it hit me like that, but here's why. In our area alone, and I don't have children, so keep that in mind. I'm not well networked into communities or schools. Do you know how many teen suicides have happened in this little area? And Tom, I know about a fraction of them. So you talk about reclaiming the authority and hope and and that's why we're doing this episode, but reclaiming that authority. Why did those kids commit suicide? Well, those important things, I mean, so many levels to that, but that's why those, and what you just said, the fact that you guys were so conscious to put that authority in their hands and help your students walk through that. Wow. Kudos to you, Tom. Anyways, pardon my emotion there.
Well, because I share in that with you. I mean,
wow.
And I think that's so important, right? It's this, it's so easy to have a visceral knee-jerk reaction to an event, right? And the long-term consequences. And you're absolutely right. The same thing happened in the US and I would guess globally when we actually see the full data. The incidence of children harming themselves through cutting and other, dysfunctional behaviors as a result of stress went up, and it happened all over. And so, so I think, one of the things that we have an obligation as people to do is to say, okay, fine, okay, now we're gonna reclaim this. We are not going to we're not going to give in. We've been bombarded, right? You think about the battle for Britain in World War II, right? And the bombings in London that just went on day and night, and how the English, they were resolute. Lots of pain and challenge and destruction, but they were resolute in reclaiming the authority that in fact, no, they were not going to succumb. We see it with the Ukrainians, right? I mean, I think they're like, we're not giving up the authority over our lives and over our country. So I think that's just an important thing. But I think you can do it, right? But it doesn't have to be big steps, right? Reclaiming, like, and if people felt like they retreated, coming out of that retreat doesn't have to be like, boom, everything's back to normal. It can be, look, I'm going to take steps. And we, as I observe people, like, that's an important thing. I'm going to re-engage in society. And we all had to relearn some things. Like, one thing that happened, especially for young people, is for that, 18 months or 2-year period, they were able to get, pretty much everything from an education perspective. It was sort of on demand. You could just go grab the Zoom link and watch it when you wanted to watch it, take the exams when you wanted to take the exams. And so it was like being in a casino, right? You had no sense of time anymore.
Yeah.
And now here we're back, and guess what? Now all of a sudden the schedule matters again. You have to show up at certain times. You have to be in a certain place at a certain time. You have to be able to perform a certain function at a certain time. And you know what? People are struggling with that.
Yeah.
Because it's getting back in the habit of a routine that is more ordered in many ways. So, I think it's just getting back to that space and saying, I'm going to take these steps, and literally I'm going to acknowledge that the world is a risky place, but I'm not going to retreat from it.
Yeah.
I think that's step one.
We need to, as a society.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I wanted to ask you about, and maybe I should have asked this before, and we kind of touched on it. I don't know if you want to go there at all a little bit deeper, but I guess that step 1 to whatever we want to do is really acknowledging the residual effects. We've talked about that. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I mean,
okay.
if you turned on the news or you were on social media at all, the whole experience of the last couple of years, and in the United States, of course, you had social unrest going on at the same time, and political craziness. Like, I'm sure the rest of the world looks at the United States and says, those people need to chill out.
Well, Canada too. I'll speak for, we ain't no shining star these days either. So,
I mean, and all, just an uncertainty and all that, and it's stressful, and it's compounding stress, right? I think, like, even people who are doing their very best to, like, not buy into all of that,
yeah.
There was stress created, right? And stress ultimately has to have a pressure valve. and stress either eats you alive, or you figure out eventually you have to let it go. And so I think that's what one thing that's really important is to recognize, look, we've all been under a lot of stress the last years. So like I asked myself the other day, man, at 10 o'clock at night, usually you're still raring to go for another hour and a half. And like in the last 3 months, like at 10 o'clock, I'm like, I'm done. Well, it's probably just your stress level, right? And then fatigue. I think people got tired, and there were things to be grieved, right? And no doubt, COVID did affect human beings, and there were people who lost their lives, who became very, very ill. They had family members who were ill or passed away. That's a grief-inducing thing, and in many ways, we didn't get, in the midst of all that, we didn't get the normalized processes to deal with that grief, right? We couldn't attend a funeral.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there, and if you're a person of faith, right, many folks had a hard time getting to a place of worship where they could be in the place.
Exactly.
Right. Which for me, that was a big deal. That was one of the hardest things for me, was to not, early on, was to be sort of separated from that support community that helps you deal with hard things, right? And we couldn't see senior members of our family.
I was just going to say, up here, and again, you're in Nebraska, so I kind of want to mention here, church was a no-go for most of the time. People were working from home. And at one point here in Manitoba, much across Canada, we weren't allowed to see people from different households. So friends, family, and then masking and, stay 6 feet away. I mean, I'm going to say it. I think there's a lot of traumatized human beings walking around.
There's no question about that. And I think we just have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And then we have to say, okay, what can we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And what we can do about it, it's step one is to acknowledge it. There's a thing called the Stockdale Paradox, right? Which is built around the experience of a guy named Jim Stockdale, who was the highest ranking naval aviator that was held in captivity in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam conflict. And Jim Stockdale was there for a long time. And when he was finally released, and the guys that came out of the prison camp of that they experienced, and this was the same thing happened in Nazi Germany, and there's all kinds of environments where this happened. Why did some people survive and others didn't? And the ones who survived, here's what they did. And not only did they survive, but they ultimately thrived, right? Not discounting the hardship and the challenges they had coming out of those experiences. But what was the difference? The difference is that they were able to acknowledge the problem and say, this is awful, and I don't know when it will end, right? But they were also able to acknowledge the hardship and keep hope alive.
Wow.
The guys that struggled, that didn't come out of Vietnam, out of the prison camps, were the guys who were like, they'll get me out of here by Christmas. And then Christmas would show up, and they were still in. And they'd say, well, they'll get me out of here by Easter. And then Easter would come, and they'd still be in. They're going to get me out of here by, 4th of July. And 4th of July would come. And then they would say, well, by Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving would come, and they would still run out, and they would die.
Oh, wow. Because
they'd lost hope. Right. So you have to confront the brutal reality, right? The brutal reality is this was awful. And it was a very, very challenging and painful experience. But how do I keep hope alive? Right. And that as a human being, I can overcome this, and I can come out of this and come out stronger, not without a few battle scars, right? Because we were all touched in one way or another. Internally, psychologically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, by this situation. So it's, I think, really thinking about wellness and actually then re-engaging with human beings. And like, I've had some of the deepest and most really powerful conversations in the last year with people, and even people on airplanes or, just kind of in passing, because people are so hungry to be reconnected. And I think the faster we do that, and the more thoughtfully and the more kindly, with a generous attitude, like let people say what's on their hearts, let them say it, right? And don't judge, don't react, but get it out. Because, for example, you're seeing this spate of violence in the United States, and I'm convinced much of that is tied to the stress of the last 2 years.
Oh, amen. I think society, from what I see, is just at a bit of a boiling point. And you look at people that snap, like you're saying, violence, drug abuse, domestic abuse, it's all gone up. Why?
Right.
Because fortunately, me at my age, have never had to deal with a situation like this. We don't know what to do with these emotions. So what happens, right? They explode outwards, right?
Exactly right. And I think it's from my perspective, like I think about like leaders. Okay, so there are leaders in families, there's leaders in companies, leaders in communities, leaders in organizations. Those folks who are in leadership or who are like, oh, look, somebody's got to do something, and unfortunately it has to be me. I'm going to claim leadership. If we do that from a place of awareness and thoughtfulness, and a place of courage that says, look, I've learned something. For me, I will tell you, I lasted in the cave about 2 weeks. and I literally came to the conclusion about day 15, Tom, if you retreat, you're going to lose who you are. You may not come out. And that which sounds really weird, but I can remember thinking, look, assess the risk, but assess the full risk. And for me, the risk would have been staying in the cave. And so, fortunately, I was old enough to be self-aware to say, okay, so how do I do that? And I had all kinds of strategies and sort of quasi-civil disobedience that how I did that.
We could do a series of 10 here.
Right. So I think about it almost as a 4-step process, right? So the first thing that we do is that we re-engage, and I think some people like this is going to be like, oh no, I already did this. Yeah, exactly. Like, but I think there's this process of looking around our organizations, whether it's our family members, whether it's friends, whether it's the company we run, whatever it is, where we have a circle of influence, is to say, okay, how do we help people re-engage, right? And there's a variety of ways to do that, and to also be very cognizant of the fact that some people are going to re-engage quickly, and other people will re-engage in a very methodical, 2-step forward, 1-step back kind of approach, because they're still working through fear. What I learned, Tracy, I think, is that there are distinct groups of human beings about how they deal with fear and uncertainty.
Yes. I had a theory, Tom. I want to jump in there really quick. Sorry. I had a theory about people and how they handled and reacted to the pandemic based on personality types. I'm big into personality types and observing people. And if you look at I go on the DISC assessment, and if you look at the 4 personality types, the D's, they're like, whatever, I'm out of here. Like, this is baloney. The I's are like, oh my God, I'm devastated because I can't socialize and I'm having a hard time. The calculated people, and then the nurturers that care and don't. Anyways, that was my little random theory. Pardon me for jumping in there.
No, but you're right. And I think that's really an interesting thing, is if people say to themselves, okay, which of those quadrants do I tend to fit in? It might help me understand why I reacted the way I did. And it might also, if I understand how these other people in my sphere of connection, that they're in different places, and they are different personality types, maybe that explains why they behave differently under the same umbrella of circumstance than I did. And it's neither right nor wrong, right? It's simply acknowledging and understanding, and then literally having the courage and sort of the grit to say, look, I refuse to stay where I am. Like there's a great line. It's this is silly, but it's a great line. There's a movie called Christopher Robin, right, which is sort of a remake of the Winnie the Pooh story, right?
Yeah.
And Christopher Robin's trying to figure out his life, right, as an adult, and he's trying to figure out like how to get where I want to be. And Winnie the Pooh says, well, usually I just walk away from where I am.
Gold. How simple, but often how much do we complicate it?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's the truth, right? Is how we reemerge is we walk away from where we are. We walk towards something as opposed to running from something. And so now it's time to begin to decide, I'm going to move towards X.
Yeah.
And if every person can do that and think about what, and for X, for me, it might be, I'm going to re-engage with clients and companies and more students and more high schools. And we're going to that's where I'm moving towards. For somebody else, it might be as simple as I'm going to move towards my neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to move towards, getting back into shape, right? I'm going to move towards whatever it is. But I think that's a powerful tool, right? And I think we also learned, Tracy, and I'd be interested in your thought about this because you interact with so many people. I think we're built as human beings to be engaged in a really systematic and sort of holistic way. Like Zoom's great, but there's a lot that you miss out on in actually interacting with a human being. And I think we're designed to be together, like in the same place, face to face, spilling water on each other, sharing a beer together.
Well, and I think, Tom, that's what's been so damaging about this, all the fear and then everything else. But I think the true trauma in this is the separation. Because if you think back, we're not herd, pack, whatever the right word is. From the beginning of time, we're meant to be a society, a herd, a pack to just thrive, to live, right? Back in the day, that's how you existed. I mean, we've changed a little bit, but not so much. We have our family groups, extended, church, work, but then that's all cut off. We're not ready for that. And as much as we may think we're individuals and some are introverted, some are extroverted, we do need that. And I think that's where the true trauma is. And then if you don't do something for a long time, you get scared of it. Right? It's like, oh, I gotta go back in society. And then, like you said, walk towards it. Just do it. Go to the store, have a conversation with a stranger, hug somebody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is. It's that saying to myself, I'm going to reconnect. And I think, the other one that I think is interesting is we have to actually have this conversation internally with ourselves and inside of organizations. Okay, are we going to allow fear to set up shop here for the long term? And I think those organizations that say, no, thank you for coming. We have not really enjoyed your presence here. So we're going to find thoughtful, rational ways to say goodbye to you. We're going to acknowledge that fear is an emotion, but not a fact. Fear is an emotion, not a fact, and that everything we want is on the other side of fear, right? The things we want are on the other side of that. So I think we have to have ways. And so one of the things that we did, and not everybody participated, and we were very thoughtful about it. This spring, we had a little celebration with our student community, and they had said to me, like, the day is going to come, we're going to get to burn the masks. And I said, when that day comes, we'll do that at my house. We'll go down to my barn and we will do that.
Oh, I love it.
And so finally, the student culture team, they came to me and they said, okay, it's time. I said, all right, we'll do this. But I said, the thing we're going to do is that we're going to honor those folks, that this was also, they lost people, and that for them, they might have worn the mask to try to protect an elderly person who was really at risk. So we're going to honor everybody. And they did this great little quiet ceremony. And the funniest one is my little guys that are almost 10, my twin 10-year-olds. Of course, they had gathered up a collection of masks over the last couple of years. I mean, I'll bet they had 30 each of all. I mean, because everybody early on, everybody that knew a kid was sending them like, these personalized kind of, if a mask could be cute, they were kind of cute, right? You have never seen two happier 10-year-olds. I can remember Kate, she had her armful of the stuff and she just walked up to this little fire ring and she dropped it in and she got the biggest smile on her face. Because I think what happened in that moment is this little 10-year-old girl said, I'm claiming my life back right now. And COVID, you're gone.
Tom,
you're
stop.
Gone, right?
Yeah.
And I watched college guys, big, tough farm kids, and you could watch them. They let go of that mask and you could feel them relax. And not everybody did it, but for those that was a way for us to say, okay, we are claiming, like we're saying goodbye to that. We acknowledge it. It was hard. In many cases, it had all kinds of consequences none of us wanted, but we're now letting go of that. We're moving on, and we're going to do that as honorably as we have, but we are moving on. And I think of all of us whether it's and each organization, each family will maybe find a different way, but to let kids do that. And so people who do have children, one thing I would encourage you is like, give your child a moment in which they can acknowledge the experience of what's happened and reclaim their authority over life, right? Because they have authority and they've been given this spark. And so let them reclaim the spark.
Wow, that's powerful. And I've never heard this. I've thought it, but I think what we're missing is leadership in this. Exactly like you just, I've never heard, you hit the nail on the head. And I think the power in this episode is what you're saying, but who else is out there? I mean, the media, I'm sorry. The media sells fear to get clicks to make money. It's not in their interest to provide the society with leadership out of this. I'm just going to call it how I see it. Send me hate mail. I don't care. But that's it, right? There's nobody. And sometimes in workplaces, being a boss, you're so concerned about the rules. Who is taking and giving permission to lead themselves and others out of this situation? Because we have to. We have to, right?
Absolutely. And certainly I have a few friends, like they are in a really immunocompromised space, right? I'm with them. I love them. I care about them. And I understand that they're going to handle this differently than I am. And the good news is we have the technology and the way to do that. But I've even seen some of them regrabbing that. And I've got, we have a really good friend who has got all kinds of health challenges, right? And wheelchair bound and all kinds of things, right? And she's just been a warrior, right? Like, I am not giving in to anything. I would rather live my life and live it fully than retreat from it. And I've learned a lot from her as well in that whole space. And I think it's also about it's an interesting time to reinvent ourselves.
Ooh, yes.
Because we get to come out of this and why the labor shortage. And I still am trying to fully understand all of that. But I think part of it is now that I'm been through this, how do I want to emerge? Yeah. And what do I want to do? But one of my sons, he was interesting, is during this whole thing, he learned a whole bunch of different skills. Mm-hmm. Right. So
Yeah.
He's like he can drywall anything today. and he learned how to make, hatchets, and he just like, okay, I got some time on my hands, so I can either, power watch Netflix or I can go learn something. Well, so I think that's a really important question for people. Like, okay, so yeah, how am I going to reinvent? And it's like a kind of a cool opportunity to say, okay, so what's the next chapter? Because and to say, and I think this is important, and I'm absolutely with you. So many people, they don't want us to turn the page because they're gaining something from not turning the page.
Yep.
I don't gain anything from not turning the page. So my gain is by turning the page. And I think the more of us who say, look, the trade-off, by turning the page, I get more than I lose, then what will happen is always the case, right? Is that the trailing folks will eventually come around and say, oh, well, time to move on. But by that time, we'll have all moved on.
I love it.
So don't wait for permission. That's one thing I know for sure. Do not wait for permission. That's
well, and it's so weird. I'm just so fascinated by this conversation because I think everybody, even though the mandates are done here, people are still wearing masks. I mean, there's the fear of what looms in fall. But that's exactly it. There's nobody giving anybody permission. And I think everybody's kind of looking around like, what next? Is it okay to move on? It's kind of insensitive. It's a weird time. And I love what you're saying. It's just, let's lead ourselves out of here, right? We have to, because if we stay stagnant and on this path, I'm not sure that that's too healthy for people, societies, and the economy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the trade-off is like, none of us know how much time we get on this planet. And I just don't want any more of it to be spent doing things that are just not vital and don't have vitality. That's the thing. It's and that's what I think is it's the critical question, right? Is what do I want life to be? And I believe that we have there's a spiritual context, and there's a relationship and a walk with God that can help us sort that out. But I don't believe we do the kingdom's work by staying in the basement. And I sure don't honor the gift of my life by hiding.
Gosh, this is gold.
I don't know. So, that's for me, like, that's how I finally resolved this, is like,
I'm sitting here speechless because you are just hitting the nail on the head over and over. I had this talk with my husband this morning. All of a sudden I said, my gosh, how many years are into this? I'm not a fearful person. I'm respectful, I'm ready to move on. But, I've been working from home and I've gotten isolated. And I said, enough, because it finally hit me. It's pretty easy when you go, okay, fall, it's going to be better. Spring, it's going to be better. We've been doing this for 2 to 3 years already. And I looked at Anthony because we were talking about something. I said, enough. Not that I'm living in fear, but I've allowed this to stop me because it's had to in certain ways. But what you're saying is just hitting home so hard, because this morning I had that same, okay, it's time. And Tracy, you need to self-lead a little bit better. And I'm hearing you going, not to overestimate myself, but where can I help others lead? Mm-hmm. That may not be as comfortable, right?
Yeah. But I think what that you've said this a couple of times, and I think you're exactly right, is permission, right? And for some reason, because we are a polite people, right? And so we try to do the right thing, and we want to have people around us be comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've all sort of lured into like this politeness thing. And I'm certainly not saying stop being kind or being gracious and grateful. The key is to say, I'm gonna live large again. I'm going to take this experience of life, and I'm gonna grab it. And and the things that maybe before, the good news is there are some things we can maybe let go of in the process of emerging from this. Like, I'm probably not nearly as worried about a lot of little details as I used to be. Like, that bit of paperwork will take care of itself. We'll get there. But if I can sit and with a couple of friends and have a really good cup of coffee or a really good cold beer, right, and just enjoy being with them, right, and being, and I'm I do a little bit of client work, and so now I've been back for the last 2 years really with clients a lot more, the ones that were comfortable with that, and in the last year absolutely with people. And what I'm learning is like facilitating a group's process when we were trying to do it through Zoom. Oh, it was painful and it took forever. Like, and you could never read people. And now when I get people in a room, right, there is an energy and there's a depth there that we can all pull on and call on because we've had this shared experience. When we're ready to move forward, man, I mean, people are ready to move forward. So I would encourage, anybody that's listening, if you are the boss, right? If you're the leader, even if you're the quiet, unheralded leader, no title, but you're the leader, right? Now's the time. And in business, like, think about customer interaction. I mean, I got to tell you, the other day we were we stopped to get flowers for, I can't remember, some event we were going to, and the lady behind the counter had my kids with me, and she engaged with them in a way that was so fantastic, because she was like, "Oh, I see you've got your Kansas City Royals hat on." Well, I grew up in Kansas City, and my grandpa used to take me to Royals games, and there was this interaction. She was interacting with the customer and I've had more of those kind of experiences in the last few months than I can remember having pre-COVID, when we were all in such a hurry.
Yes.
Like, and I've even had a couple of interactions, like, airlines are still not running efficiently, but I've had more great interactions with customer service people and with gate agents who are claiming back, look, I know this is hard, and I know that we're not on time, but I want you to know I care about you, and we're going to laugh our way through this together, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this better. And I had a friend yesterday. He said, all the food service places are just still struggling with staffing. And he said, we were trying to eat breakfast on a Sunday morning, and it was just taking forever. And he said, but this waitress kept coming back, and she's like, "I'm really sorry." And finally she came, she said, "Look," she said, "it's going to be another 15 or 20 minutes. I want to respect your time. And so if this isn't the right place for you to be today, I just want you to know this is the best we're going to be able to do, but I want to respect your time." Wow. And my friend said, we were out of time, and she honored us. And he said, "It's the biggest tip I've ever left."
That was right? Very thoughtful.
But how cool is that kind of interaction? So I think people want to get, and I think we want to bring our humanity to the table. And frankly, that's one of the things that I would also throw out there, right, is let go of all of this sort of the craziness of the sort of PC world that we live in, and let go of that and just engage with human beings, right? I mean, I know for a fact that at our senior celebration, like, I hugged more people than I've hugged in 2 years. And it was fantastic, right? just to have that. And so, leaders out there, man, just claim it back. Take it back. This belongs to us.
I love it. Tom, prior to our session together, I was trying to think of a plan to go into every home and cut the cable in every gym and every old folks home so they couldn't watch news. Now I have a new idea. We're going to hijack their programming and put Tom Field on there 24/7 because this is a message that I need, everybody needs, because it's time, right?
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah.
And we are, there are so many wonderful people. This is still a beautiful world, right? Louis Armstrong, that music, that song it's as right today. It's more right today than it was when he wrote it and performed it, right? And it is a beautiful world. And I'm not discounting the hardship and the toughness and the struggle. But what I've learned, and this is the thing that I did not expect to learn in the last 2 years, I have learned that joy is made of sandpaper and pressure, right? And that the struggle gives us joy. But when we stop struggling, when we just conform and relent, and we just give in to whatever the force is, there's not a lot of joy in that, right? And I have a couple of our students and alums who are in the wine business, right? And I'm very excited about them being very successful because that's part of my retirement plan.
Oh, nice.
Hanging out with them, right? But they said, the only way you can make wine is you got to crush the grapes.
Oh.
And so that's a cool analogy for me to think about, right? Is, and like I got to break the skin of the grape to get to the juice. So this maybe this last 2 years in some way has been a gift because it's reminded me that it ain't easy. There's no guarantee that it's easy. Yeah. And I'm going to send you a link to a song, this young songwriter up in the Dakotas that has written this beautiful song about agriculture that's just fantastic. I'm going to send that to you. The key is that let's load them up and let's go, right? I mean, my dad used to say, saddle up and ride. Well, it's time. Let's saddle them up. Let's get back on. It's time to ride. It's time. Now's our time. Let's do it.
Gosh, Tom, I have loved this episode. I just can't even put it into words. I think we did this episode just for me because you know what? I'm a positive go-getter kind of gal, but I even need this message right now. This is unbelievable. So I'm going to figure out how to hijack CNN, Fox News, CBC, and then we're going to get you on programming. Okay.
Well, yeah, but it's not a bad idea to just say, to re-engage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to disengage from the virtual world so I can re-enter the visceral world.
Yes.
And I will tell you, I have not been on. So I dropped my Twitter account. Best thing I ever did. And I could care less. Twitter, one way, it doesn't matter to me. Like I just didn't need it. I haven't been on Facebook in 2 years.
Good for you.
Right now, we still have social media in our program, but I hired somebody who's good at that. And I said, I'm not going to check on this. So I'm just trusting you to make it really good because I'm not engaging.
Nice.
I know we need it, but I don't need it personally. Yep. So, right. So I do think you're right. Like it's okay to say to people, you know what? Turn the news off.
Mm-hmm. I had always wondered if there was no news and no social media, how would this whole pandemic have progressed?
Yeah. And ultimately we get to decide the story, right? And we get to decide how we want to remember the story. And we all have things where we can look back in our lives and we said, that was a crappy moment, or that was hard, or it was difficult or painful or even tragic. Yeah. But how do I rethink, and not to be disauthentic, but how do I take that and say, you know what, there's another way to see this.
Yes.
With retrospect. And So but I'm just so locked into this, like, man, just, I gave a talk of about 6 months ago, and it was titled "Get Out of the Basement."
Nice. You need to go on a speaking tour until I can hijack all the TV and we can program them with Tom Field. You need to go on a speaking tour. I have big plans for you, Tom. Tell the university.
My new agent.
Yeah, I'm your new agent, just so you know. Oh, I laugh, but Tom, this has been incredible. Thank you.
Well, I'm hopeful there's a pearl in there for people. And I just want to say to all of your listeners, we've been through something tough and rough together. And I'm so proud of the people of Canada. And I'm so proud of the people in the United States and Australia, New Zealand, and all over the world who kept it together and build, aspire, have courage. Greatness is in you, and it's time to let that greatness out.
I love it. I think those are the best words of wisdom that we can wrap up on. So for the 100th time, Tom, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. Thank you.
Absolutely my honor. Thank you.
Gosh, and you in the audience, did you love this as much as I did? Oh my goodness. If so, please like it, share it, get it out there, because every single farmer, every single person in this world needs to hear the message that Tom just shared. It's time. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.